Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. It's great to see so many people have joined following our part one of this series. So today we'll be doing a little bit of a deeper dive into beyond time and task and focusing on looking at how outcome-focused support can be used within organizations. And today we're joined by Chris Tanner, who's going to do a short presentation followed by a demonstration of the iPlanet system. So take it away, Chris.
Thanks, Siobhan. Morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Nice to see so many of you here. Looks like we've got most of the UK and Ireland represented somewhere today, so that's great. So yes, so as Siobhan said, today we're going to be looking at part two of Beyond Time and Task. So we're looking at outcomes in social care. So this series of webinars is looking at outcomes throughout the sector. So, excuse me, just a quick introduction for myself. I'm the client director for Aspirico for the UK and Ireland. And before joining Aspirico, I was actually worked in social care for over a decade myself. I've been a registered manager, a regional ops director, and also worked on some projects, but particularly around new models of care and innovation in social care settings. You can find me on LinkedIn if you want to keep up to date with what's going on at Aspirico. But we'll crack on with today's webinar. So today's webinar is the second in a series of four where we're looking at outcomes in the social care sector overall. So last time we looked at personalisation as a whole within the social care system, what that looks like, and we looked at the traditional model and how that sort of time and task model, the sector's been trying to move on to a more personalised system, what that looks like. And obviously that needs to really be commissioner led ultimately, but we looked at the service user portal. So in terms of the one thing across all services for an individual that really should be constant are people's outcomes. They may have different plans in different settings, supported differently in different settings, but the ultimate goals and outcomes for that individual should be consistent. Today, we're going to be looking a lot more at, on a provider level, how iPlanet in particular, but technology as a whole, can support individual providers in making their services more outcome focused, and outcomes are really the cornerstone of personalisation. And we're going to look at those principles, how they've shaped iPlanet in particular, and then I'll show you on the system how that allows providers to deliver an evidence outcome-focused services as we move towards focusing more on outcomes across the sector, with outcome-based commissioning on the horizon, as well as more integrated services. So to start off with, just a recap, we discussed last time, but for those of you who weren't here and also just in general, we're going to look at outcomes being the foundation of a person-centered approach. So what does that mean, and how does that differ from the traditional approach? So traditionally, the traditional approach would be services would be very generic. So individuals' personal circumstances weren't necessarily considered. Support was effectively a menu. You had a service, and this is what you got, and you could buy it like you buy bits of a spec of a car or something like that. Whereas a person-centered approach is far more personalised, and so individuals actually have some kind of choice, have some level of control over their care plan, over the support plan, how their support is delivered, and their changing needs are taken into consideration rather than just saying this is the service you're getting. Traditional approach was often much more institutional, so the same type of care and support was provided for everybody, and it would often actually create dependency, because what it was focused on were doing the things that were judged that individual could do for themselves, so that you ended up with time and task-based services whereas a person-centered approach is far more independence orientated. So we're looking at people being able to maintain their own daily activities and support them to connect with communities, connect with their families, their circle of support. The traditional approach was also deficit-based. I know from my own experience, I know years and years ago when I first started with social care, risk assessments and care plans and support plans were designed around what that person couldn't do. So Mrs. Jones, was adjudged that because she isn't so great at getting herself washed and dressed in the morning, that's what her support plan would be. A more person-centered approach is looking at those strengths-based. So maybe Mrs. Jones isn't so great at getting herself washed and dressed in the morning, but actually she used to be a piano teacher and she speaks 3 languages. She really loves baking, and we can build a support plan on those strengths, building the support plan around those assets, and from doing that, you get much better outcomes for the individual, and they move much more towards independence. And what it boils down to really is that the traditional approach was input focused. Progress was measured by how many tasks someone had done, and that's that time and task, as you referred to in the UK. I'm not sure about Ireland, but that time and task approach where from commissioning down, you're saying, right, you've got this much time to do this many tasks. So these are the inputs. So we help Mrs. Jones get washed and dressed. We help Mrs. Jones have breakfast. That doesn't really help anyone become more independent, and it doesn't certainly help them meet any outcomes. It's what everybody does before they start the things that they enjoy doing in life. And that's really what that outcome focused support is really about. It's about looking at the goals the person wants to achieve, taking a strength-based approach to what they can do, and then using that to personalize the support plan that helps them reach independence. And the traditional approach was also very risk averse. And I again, from personal experience, I remember seeing risk assessments which basically listed a lot of things that someone can't do because it's been deemed to be too risky, as opposed to being risk aware. If you start with what someone wants to achieve, you start with what they can do and their strengths, and then you mitigate the risks in doing that, so that you're actually aware of the risks and you're putting measures in place to control those risks as far as possible, with the aim of reaching an outcome or achieving something, as opposed to just doing a risk assessment and saying, right, we can't do that today because it's too dangerous. And these principles are what underlined how we built iPlanet. They're really the foundations of how we built iPlanet. We started with a supportive person, and then which puts the person at the heart of their service for the individual. But for providers, it means it puts all of their people at the heart of all of their services. So it really does become a person-centered service. I see person-centered on provider websites all the time. The reality isn't always the same. We then built the person's outcomes around that. So that meant for the person supported, their services are becoming outcome focused straight away, and we're far more independence orientated. For providers, it actually produces really rich data against KPIs and different frameworks, and internal reporting on achieving those outcomes. And that's going to be increasingly important as we move forward towards outcome-based commissioning. Certainly in the UK, it's already being piloted in a number of sites and around the country, and it will be very important when the integrated care systems come into effect. We then built the person support plan and integrated risk management into that support plan. So what that means is that the support plans are you can personalize them, and they're configurable for each provider. So we can work with you to see how you want to work, how a provider wants to personalize their systems and configure a support plan accordingly. But for people supported as well, they're very accessible, very easy to use the way they've been formatted. And it also allows providers to be risk aware. By integrating risk, you can actually link specified risk assessments against specified activity. We then built the person portal. So ultimately, an individual's outcomes and their support plan don't belong to any of us, they belong to that person. So via the person portal that we looked at on the last webinar, it means that the person supported has real ownership of their service. They're included in what's happening. Support is being done with them. It's not being done to them. They can see their progress towards their outcomes. They can also, using iPlan, they can also invite people within their circle of support to access their plans and also communicate directly using the internal messaging system. So for providers, that allows for improved communication between the individual and their wider circle of support and internal teams, and really produces supports a co-productive approach to support planning and support delivery. We then took all of this wonderful software and put it on the cloud so that everything's monitored in real time. So for providers, you can evidence best practice, you can monitor quality and compliance in real time as it happens, and that makes services much safer, much more responsive, and you can analyze trends, and you can stop adverse events happening before they happen, and you can celebrate best practice and embed that culture of continuous improvement throughout the organization. And then over the years, we've also developed additional provider tools to sit around that, still based on an architecture that the person supported is at the center of it. So there are modules available such as incident location management, referrals, assessments. There are a range. It's not one size fits all. The same as support is a one size fits all. iPlan is a one size fits all system for organizations. It depends on the size, the nature of your organization. But those additional tools allow operations to be organized and efficient, and also your monitoring, and that lets you focus on service delivery and that continuous improvement culture. So having built iPlanet in this way, what happens? What does that mean? What does that mean for people who use iPlanet? Where you look at traditional support planning, there may have been a focus on tasks, and you're measuring on what you do. And there's that traditional approach of considering weaknesses and deficits, and you look to mitigate risks. And what you're essentially doing, and the real reason why Declan founded Asperico in the first place was his own experience of he felt that people were being fitted into processes that were built for the provider, and what that promotes is a transactional approach. What it then becomes is, by taking a more person-centered approach in the way we've built iPlanet, is the support planning becomes independence planning. The focus is on quality of life. You're not measuring what you're doing, you're measuring the impact of what you're doing. You're building on individual strengths and their own wishes. You're not eliminating any activity because of safety concerns, because you're ensuring safety in finding that independence. So your processes are built around the people supported, and that transactional approach to support actually becomes a relationship approach. What you're doing is managing those relationships.